So hello, epic humans, and welcome to the show. And thank you for being here. So please do say hello to us in the comments and let us know you're here, because we feel that this show isn't just about us. We really want to hear from you because we really value your input and perspectives. And so we will try to get through as many comments as we possibly can. So yeah, do say hello and let us know you're here. So today we're going to be talking about something that's very close to the hearts of all the team, and no doubt for most of you tuning in as well, and that is sanctuaries or sanctuary for other animals. And so we'll be exploring a little, of some of the difficulties that are faced by sanctuaries, and also maybe how we can support them as advocates, as activists. And also we'll be looking at maybe how we can bring sanctuaries into our animal rights and vegan advocacy in order to show the other animals as the unique individuals that they are and help people make that connection. Also, I think we're going to be looking at maybe how we respectfully interact with the residents of sanctuaries, and perhaps even how we might provide sanctuary to other animals ourselves in small ways. Before we go into our topic, I believe that Tom, who is our correspondent out in the field, has the news of the week. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just been reading up on the latest news, and there's a couple of interesting stories actually that I can share with you all. So the first one is there was a recent Zoom video leak, which was exposed by hunt saboteurs in the UK. And this video footage showed discussion from a recent hunt office Zoom discussion in which ex-police officers and current hunters and other people involved in the hierarchical organization were talking about ways tactics that they could use to kind of smoke screen the legal loopholes of trail hunting, so that they could kind of seem to be following the law, but in actual fact their intention is to kind of break the law and really kind of go on that side. And this was leaked by the hunt saboteurs, and it was mentioned covered in numerous sort of newspapers and also on television. I know ITV News did a piece on it. And then sort of about a few days ago, the National Trust, which is one of the largest UK land bodies in the UK, and they issue trail hunting licenses typically to these lobbying hunt groups. And following this leaked information, the police have launched an investigation to assess if there's any sort of actual criminal evidence to suggest that the hunt officers behaved criminally, which we know they have been for many years. But the National Trust have temporarily said they're going to suspend and pause trail hunting on their properties, so pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. So we'll see what happens with that. But this is just an example of how the work that the hunt sabs have done and continue to do to help expose the criminality and the immorality that the fox killers engage in. And an example of how, the media can help bring further awareness to this exploitation. And the other bit of news is touching on that. Yeah, is an example of how mainstream media can help sometimes expose aspects of veganism. And this is kind of just a little lighthearted story. My parents, every morning, typically my dad will make my mom a cup of tea and bring it up to her. And he listens to Radio 4 in the morning. And this particular morning, he was making the cups of tea, and he came up to my mom to give her the cup of tea, and he said, "Marion, Lewis Hamilton's dog, canine friend Roscoe, is vegan." And and my mom just simply replied, "Yeah, I know." Because this has previously been mentioned, I think a few years recently, the start of the year, Roscoe became vegan. But in an interview on BBC TV following his recent World Championship win, he's 7-time world champion and F1 champion, Lewis talked about how Roscoe is eating a vegan diet and he's lost a lot of weight, and he's doing very well. So and this was kind of broadcast on multiple BBC channels, on TV, on radio. So, yeah, that's a nice little story to end on.
Excellent.
And can I just,
so I was just going to say, there's quite a few people saying hello in the comments. So I just wanted to say hello to who've we got here? Let's see. Oh, we've got Deepak. Hi, Deepak. Hi, Sam. And we've got Kristen, who is, of course, Jeremy's mom. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Deb. Deb's a regular now as well. Nice to see you, Deb. We've got Bernie, Trash Carcass. What an amazing name. I love that. And we've got Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. And we've got Michelle. Hi, Michelle. We really enjoyed your discussion that you had with Roger the other day. So welcome to our show.
Which my mom's just echoing here in the comments. So I was just a couple of days ago, which you can find. I think you've uploaded on your channel too, Roger. So either your channel or Michelle's channel it's on.
Yeah, I left it for a while, and then I thought I'd upload it on mine because there's going to be some people on mine that probably don't cross over. So yeah, mind you, I didn't
crossover. I didn't crossover episode, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't clear that with Michelle, so I hope it's okay, Michelle.
If it's not, let us know in the comments. We can publicly shame Roger.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. Trash Carcass has just mentioned Vegan Gays helped us to raise almost $2,000. So I'm wondering if that's for advocacy work or a sanctuary specifically, or sounds on the surface that sounds really cool. Yeah, but this is to your point, your news, Tom. Sam just said excellent pressure campaigning by the SABs, in my opinion. Not just the National Trust, but the Forestry Commission and many others suspending hunts from their land. May only be temporary, but fantastic to see.
Yeah, Sam's
so
right.
It's keeping the pressure, isn't it? Yeah.
Pressure, yeah. There are other land body groups who have suspended the trail hunting, but I guess the National Trust is one of the bigger ones, which is why the media probably mentioned it.
What's the clarification though? Because I think you said originally, Tom, talk about trail hunts.
Mm.
Is that a drag hunt? I mean, the anti-blood sports people put that forward as an alternative to live quarry in the first place. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. In the sense that I know that Sam said kind of stopped hunting as a general matter, but then there was this issue about trail hunting as well. I just wasn't sure whether there was any ambiguity there or whether it's just that I'm not understanding it, which is quite possible. Because, let's face it, this activity is supposed to be banned.
Yeah.
And we know from, back in the 1980s, everybody, we used to say, we're going to ban this, and then we'd all become hunt monitors. And then all we thought we'd need to do is report it to the police, and they would kind of come in, like John Wayne, and arrest everybody. And of course, it doesn't happen. Yeah. So it's quite interesting, really, that we're in the 21st century now, still kind of arguing about the hunt ban. And then you've got this issue of, I'm not quite sure what the National Trust has banned. So if people like Sam or anybody else knows, can fill me on that, because it's a detail that I don't understand. The trail hunting thing, because that sounds like drag hunting to me. Don't know.
And good news for you, Roger. You're in the clear.
Oh,
Michelle says this one.
I thought I'd have to sneak off slowly.
This is excellent news. So this live stream that Trash Carcass is mentioning is that was for a local sanctuary, because that's going to be, to me, that's a big topic of today is really how we can help support our local sanctuaries, because I don't think anyone on the team has necessarily a direct connection with the sanctuary, but we all kind of support as we can, maybe a bit tethered to the sanctuaries that we support. And live streaming is a great way to do it. I think especially in the 2020 era where live events are kind of put on hold, it's a great way to kind of stay connected with the sanctuaries themselves.
You mean like live streaming from the sanctuary? Is that what you mean?
It could have been from, or it could have just been about, I guess, either or. I guess live streaming just in that more versus a static video, I think just prompts more engagement. But yeah, I'd say either work well. I think at the sanctuary would obviously be ideal. I'm not sure if that was a possible thing to do, but
because I think it was your sister Alison who talked about a sanctuary live streaming on the grounds during the lockdown. They couldn't do a open day, and it's interesting because open days are you could make pro and cons about that. So it'd be interesting, wouldn't it, in the age of live streaming, everybody's used to it, that you could get replace open days with live streams.
That's exactly right. It's Peak in Freedom, Indiana, which is quite a cool name for Sanctuaries geographic location to be. But yeah, they do. I think it's every week they do regular live streams, possibly more or less frequent depending what they have going on. But they just had their annual event Peaksgiving, which is usually a big physical event, and I think most of that was done virtually this year, obviously with a lot of support. Yeah, and I think that's been quite a good fundraiser for them to just, I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. It's just, obviously we're all having to deal with being a bit more virtual these days, aren't we?
I love that Peaksgiving. It's a good name, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I
that
know
is
that,
really good.
that Retreat is doing a live every day, a short one, focusing on different species every day. So the viewers can get in touch with the individuals living there.
So yeah, so Roger, to your question, it looks like it is it was a combination. So basically using their platform, but also having a for the local sanctuary, from the local sanctuary. So that's what a cool collaboration. I think that's a fantastic idea. I mean, how many so-called influencers, if we want to use that term, use that opportunity. I think that's great. Because I don't know, it's an interesting one. I know for all of us, sanctuaries are near and dear to our heart, but they almost seem to not get the recognition or attention that they necessarily deserve.
I think they're really struggling as well. There have been a lot of instances of sanctuaries this year struggling. I mean, I think they struggle at the best of times, but especially during the COVID lockdown when they can't run their usual summer events and open days and things like this. And also people are maybe people who might usually give donations regularly or have a regular donation set up, they might be struggling to give money because maybe they themselves are struggling a bit more financially as well. So I think sanctuaries, from the ones that I know and even ones that I've seen on social media and things, are really taking a big hit, and they're having to get more and more creative and imaginative with how they raise money. And it does sort of bring the question up, doesn't it, as like what is acceptable in kind of not just during COVID, but in normal times, what is acceptable in terms of raising money for sanctuaries? Like how do they do it, and how do you get that balance of this is how we raise money in order to keep the other animals, but do they ever, how do you get that balance of the other animals still being respected? And for example, you hear of things like sanctuaries in the past have sold the eggs that have been laid by the resident chickens in the sanctuary, or even on open days, it might be that the public have a lot of access to the other animals and want to take selfies and things like this. Or I even heard of someone quite a long time ago of giving people the chance to ride on the horses' backs in order to make money and things like that. And someone else was asking about therapy with the horses or with the dogs. So it's quite a tricky subject, isn't it, as to what is acceptable, what isn't, how can we get that balance of bringing money in without actually disrespecting the residents, because it's their home at the end of the day.
That's the framing for it, isn't it? And I just noticed it looks like the sanctuary specifically that was being referred to earlier for the fundraiser is the Roar Sanctuary. That's such a cool name for a sanctuary. I'm going to have to look up what Roar stands for, because to clarify, my mom has put up what PEAK stands for. So people, environment, animals, and kinship. And yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think when it comes to fundraising, it's being constantly there. And as I guess just taking a step back, when we look at a sanctuary in general, you're basically running a small business. You're the bookkeeper, and you're also out cleaning up, making sure things are coming in and out of the animals, shall we say. There's everything from the ground up. And yeah, maybe if there's anyone who's involved with Sanctuary in the comments, let us know. And maybe we can talk about a little bit of some of our stories. I know for me, if I had to put it in kind of 3 categories, the ways we can support sanctuaries would be the day-to-day volunteering, just coming in and getting stuck into it and shoveling and digging and all that stuff.
Shoveling what, Jeremy?
His mum's watching. He might not want to say it in front of his mum.
Hopes and dreams. Yeah, and then also I think that obviously that financial support is key, but in lieu of that, I think there's a lot we can do from a social media side of things, both from an awareness building as well as a fundraising thing. And I think oftentimes those can work in tandem. A simple thing is, I don't know how many people that are watching or on our team do the Facebook birthday fundraisers. Because let's be honest, as adults, like, what do we really need for our birthday or Christmas oftentimes? Like, I mean, just speaking generally, and to just say, hey, rather than trying to figure out something to get me, here's this sanctuary. They really could use the funds more than I could. And it takes very little effort, and Facebook automatically cycles it through people's feeds and stuff. And it's a great way to get the word out about both sanctuaries and other animals. Has anybody else done the sanctuary fundraisers?
Yeah, I've done that. And also, there's another thing that people can do is that often you can donate to a sanctuary for the amount of a bale of hay instead of a present, and then you, because I know that Hillside do this. I had some cards from Hillside last year that were sent from relatives who had donated for bales of hay, and then you get sent a card saying your relative has donated, and this is we thank them, and it's almost like an exchange. So you get a card saying they've donated, and they get the money, and it's all instead of gifts and things like that. They run that scheme, especially around Christmas. They try to promote that, so that's a really lovely thing to do as well.
I know the sanctuary where I volunteer, Tower Hill Animal Stables, they, similar to what Wendy was saying, they have like a kind of a shopping wish list, for like equipment and things that they need that people can kind of pay for like directly. So they're giving something directly to the sanctuary. And I know that this time of year, I know Tower Hill, probably other sanctuaries do this as well. They produce like a calendar, so that's a way of make a good Christmas present.
I think Back into Daylight in Ireland has got a calendar, and I think the Eden Sanctuary too, the two vegan sanctuaries, and that's an interesting one. Going back to what Wendy was saying about, if you've got sanctuaries run by vegans, then you're probably not going to get the temptation to violate the rights of the other animals there. So that would be the criteria that I would set. Obviously, I mean, somebody said, riding horses is never acceptable, which is, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, totally.
Well, didn't you say the one exception, Roger? That as long as they switch halfway through, it's okay?
Yeah. Yeah, and also the horse goes on top first sometimes as well. In fact, I think I'd support that type of riding because it never evolved to switch, would it?
And also, when you have to do with the vegan sanctuary, the food that they are selling in their cafes and restaurants is always vegan. I remember that they have a sign at the retreat explaining why, that you cannot offer sanctuary to an animal and then offer another animal as food. And I think this is very important too. I mean, to be consistent, the whole idea of offering sanctuary implies that we should be consistent on our actions.
Yeah, because I feel like as much as a sanctuary, that the more and more I've sort of been around sanctuaries and also been around other animals generally, and over the years, I feel less like a sanctuary is just a place. It's more about how we relate to other animals as well, and it's about really holding not just the physical space, but holding space for them to be individuals and to show them respect, and to try to provide an environment where we're giving them a fulfilled and enriched life as much as possible. And obviously I know that the big sanctuaries especially are in a very difficult situation with that, in that they're often financially poor, time poor, space poor. That kind of limits how much they're able to do that, which I think is where, we can really help support as much as we can. But it is, I think, more about how we relate to other animals as well, not just the actual place.
And the thing is that as activists, we get overjoyed, and as vegans, when we hear about other animals being liberated, but those individuals have to go somewhere. And usually they go to sanctuaries, and supporting sanctuaries, I think it should be part of our activism, whether it's financially or by offering our time and work, or by doing, I don't know, promotion for sanctuaries. I think it must be a part of our activism.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I heard actually, speaking to someone at one of the sanctuaries that I help out at, they were saying that they often will have activists turn up with other animals, or they will be, call them and say, "Can you take these other animals?" And then once they've left the other animals there, they disappear, and they say they never really see them or hear from them again. And it's like, that's really interesting, isn't it? And I think that really we have to step up if we are asking the sanctuaries to help us with the liberation. We then have to give them support back as well.
Have to have a big picture perspective, don't we? Because it's not just down to the mental health of the humans running the sanctuary, it's the care they can give all of the residents at the sanctuary. If they're at capacity and all of a sudden animals are being, for lack of a better term, being dumped on them, while it's good intentions, I mean, we're getting into pigs, cows, and so on, we're talking 15, 20 plus years of those hay bills and everything else. So I think we all want to see as many individuals, rescued as possible, but it has to be a big, all the factors have to be taken into consideration. Deb's, just real quickly, Deb's had a great point I want to get in here about the Cranky Vegan Patreon. I'd love to see more people doing this. Maybe the Animal Rights Show should start up a Patreon that we donate to. I don't know if we quite the following yet, but we could start doing a bit of a round. I think they vote every month, and 100% of the proceeds go to the sanctuary, which is really great, because I think, to my mom's point, oftentimes the vet bills are one of the hardest to plan for, and especially if a lot of animals are getting older, a lot of vet bills may hit at once. So, and I think the animal advocate community is hopefully pretty good at knowing which sanctuaries need the help the most in some ways. Obviously not perfect, but that Jake's system's actually quite cool in that regard, because that people will see something on social media, all this sanctuary is really struggling. Oh, maybe we should kick them the 500 pounds this month or whatever, and every little bit helps.
I think from speaking to a few people who work at sanctuaries, I know that they generally do prefer, if people can, not always possible in certain situations, but if people can give on a monthly basis, that could be helpful, just so that they can get an idea of how much they have to, for any vet bills that come up, or food and things like that you mentioned, which is very high cost. Because I know from speaking to Martin at Tower Hill, it can be quite upsetting when someone just pulls their donation for stops giving monthly, or just gives one lump donation, or it can cause more practical difficulties. But I understand that not everyone is able to do that.
Especially now that the cafes and the small shops they have are closed, so they cannot really plan. Before this call, I reached out to a friend that volunteers for the retreat, and I asked her if she knows what's the daily amount of money they need. And she told me it's 500 pounds without running costs and without vet bills. So if you multiply this, it's 14,000 a month. It's a very large amount of money, and
they've got to be one of the biggest in the UK. Sorry to
yes,
jump in there.
I think they have more than 200 residents. 1,200 residents.
I've heard numbers in that range. I hate to say, but once you get to that number of residents, it'd be hard. You're not going to go around and count every day, are you? Yeah. But
well, there's been quite a lot of the kind of movement issues have already been mentioned in the chat. I echo that thing. I VIP donate to the Cranky Vegan. I think in his last one, I think he's now saying that they're going to alternate between supporting a sanctuary one time and then a grassroots group the next. But I'm not sure about that. I just heard that in a recent video, so that needs clarification. But the issue about the thing that Mr. Whale brought up, this more contentious issue about he mentions ROI, return on investment, which from where I'm in Dublin, I thought that meant Republic of Ireland, but it means return on investment. Yeah, so that is an interesting thing, because we have to accept that there's going to be a small amount of other animals who can be placed in sanctuaries. and those then will cost a lot of money from then on. And as Jeremy said, some of them are long-living mammals, right? And so that's one issue. And so in terms of but then they always become full. When I arrived in Ireland, I was asked by someone setting up a sanctuary about my English experience, and there's always a lot of sanctuaries. They're very good intentions, and then they end up getting over full, and so that means then the cages get smaller and the space gets more cramped. Or the alternative is you start to refuse them. So it's not as though sanctuaries can rescue everybody in the first place. So I think what Jonah Whale is saying here is that, for the massive cost of them, from a vegan point of view, is that good use of money? I mean, I know that's the contentious issue about sanctuaries, but it has been raised there.
Well, as you just framed it, though, I mean, I guess to this question around why sanctuaries are selling food, I think it's more from a fundraising perspective, although I guess there's some outreach that goes into that. But I think what you mentioned, Roger, that's only one part of the picture, is the individuals which we'll get into the language in a moment. I think the other big part of that is from an awareness building perspective. I know for me personally, I mean, it's no secret, my sanctuary, I'm most closely affiliated with this friend. And spending time with individuals there has not only helped my advocacy from a claims-making perspective, the video and content and stories that I share from that is the most effective part of my advocacy, hands down. So I think it's not just a matter of the residents who are there, it's a matter of the advocacy, because they're basically the ambassadors of the movement. Each one of those individuals at Sanctuary represents tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals. And it's because of them we have a face, to put onto our messaging. Now, how much animal-centric versus human-centric framing we use is perhaps a topic for another day. However, to me, it's not just that they're the opportunity to help tell their story. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. We talked about undercover investigations on the last debates with Hess and Yates and all that stuff. But to me, sanctuaries are really the key to highlight their, as Wendy said, their unique individuality.
In a fairer and just world, you'd have governments giving financial reparation to sanctuaries to look after residents who've been victims of human oppression. We're not quite there yet, but that to me seems when you see some of these sanctuaries that are right next to farms where individuals use and exploit animals, and they're getting subsidies from governments, and then these other sanctuaries having to, work very hard and tirelessly to get the donations. It's not fair. But that's just thinking maybe in the long term that will happen. I don't know.
Yeah, and to that point, actually, sorry, Jeremy, I was just going to make a point about the people who. It's not exactly what you were talking about there, Tom, but it's kind of a bridging stone, I guess. There are people who run farms as part of animal agriculture who, have a change of heart and begin instead to provide sanctuary. For example, Jay and Katya Wild, who were shown in Alex Lockwood's short film 73 Cows. And that film actually won a BAFTA a few years ago. I don't know if people on the watching the show are familiar with it, but it's a really good short film actually to go and watch. And that is a couple who actually could no longer bear to take the cows that they were interacting with and creating bonds with to slaughter, and they just had a real change of heart and a real crisis of conscience and decided to retire. I don't like that word, but they call retire the cows. And then I think quite a few of them were rehomed to a sanctuary in Norfolk, which I think was Hillside. And then they now have just a small number of cows who they provide sanctuary to. And I think there are many examples of people who are farmers who've done that as well, sheep farmers and other people in a similar situation.
And I think when it comes down to funding, I mean, we could easily talk about the funding structure of the movement, which I think we've all got opinions on that. I mean, ideally, the sanctuaries can find ways to fund themselves. My mom just pointed out how Peak has individual supporters for residents, which I think is a great way to connect us with the individuals. I know Friend has a Be a Friend program where you can connect with specific individual and give monthly towards their care. And just a real quick shout out to Vegan Gaze, who's also streaming, but will replay. So we'll check out your stream as well later on, I'm sure. Should we? We've been talking a little about language. Should we go ahead and move on to that, Roger? You ready to do that?
Yeah, I could do. Let me just get my notes.
I'll buy you some time.
Oh, good.
It's time for the language liberation of the week.
Yeah, so we at the Animal Rights Show are interested in language, which is a gross understatement, really. But also in terms of social movement theory, the language of the social movement is incredibly important. And so we wanted to kind of try to do some illustrations of that. And so I picked out some clips from a TV show in Ireland, national TV show, in which Sandra Higgins, the director of Go Vegan World, was being interviewed. And she talks about the other animals in the way that we probably would. And the interviewer stopped her twice in order to clarify things for the audience. And so it's quite interesting how language is so kind of political. I mean, we could even start talking about things like Joan Denayer and language and this kind of stuff. But so I just want to mark your card for it. It's only a few seconds, about 1.5 minutes. And the first thing is there's somebody who represents the animal use industry, and when he stops talking, the interviewer says to Sandra, "Well, for this guy, it's a live and let live situation." And how many times have vegans heard that, a live and let live situation? And of course,
let who live?
Yeah, well, I mean, we know in the words of that famous vegetarian Paul McCartney, it's live and let die, right? And so, this live and let live thing is a totally ideological statement in the first place. So Sandra answers that really well, and then she starts talking about her sanctuary. And she talks about someone and somebody, and that's when the interviewer steps in. And then Sandra goes on and talks about the individual residents in the sanctuary, but she uses the phrase individuals. And again, she gets stopped on that language point at all. And so when it goes back then to the speciesist, he's saying, well, I find this language really interesting. He's trying to almost kind of mock it in a way. It kind of underlines the importance of language in social movements and how it can be kind of used by both sides in a kind of political kind of battle, if you like. And then he also talks about images, and he says things like, we're very clever when we kind of devise the kind of vegan friendly images, and we'll do things like we'll name the other animals, give them names, and also we'll pick a picture when the other animal looks like a kind of human expression on their face, and basically it's trying to minimize the importance of the lives of other animals. So anyway, so we can show that. So I shall click thing. Okay.
So Sandra, it's a live and let live thing for Oliver. He respects what you do, and he feels that you should do the same with him and his practices when it comes to eating meat.
It's not about respecting me as a vegan. It's about respecting the life of somebody who feels like me, someone who's capable of the same physical feelings that I have.
So when you say somebody, you're referring to animals?
I'm referring to other animals. Yeah. But I run a sanctuary in County Meath. And when I first started that sanctuary, I wasn't vegan. And I got to know the individuals who came to me. And I realized that...
Again, the individuals you're referring to?
The animals. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Oliver, give me your take on that. Animals have feelings just like
us.
Like,
I find that the use of language very interesting. And in the marketing campaigns, all vegan campaigns, you always use clever photography as well, where referring to animals as pretty much like humans, even giving them names like Charlotte and Mary and Johnny, and photographs used, they'd show like photographs of nearly animals with facial expressions, like human facial expressions, and they play and pull on the heartstrings of people.
So you don't accept they have feelings?
Yeah, it's like, so emotion is apparently only humans are capable of showing emotion. It's well, to be fair, I think that does highlight. I mean, obviously we're playing that more from the language of the individual perspective, but it does highlight that I think a key distinction between a vegan mindset and a non-vegan mindset is that human versus animal-centric framing.
Mm. And the interesting thing, of course, is that we frame our language in order to, if you like, heighten the status of other animals, and they are trying to bring that status down, and they want to make other animals a lesser than category, and this is completely deliberate, you know, because they kind of need to do that. You know, like one thing that Joan Denea says is that one of the ways that we exploit others is through our language, and whether you apply that to human rights or animal rights, that's exactly what happens. You know, we have to be very careful with our language in order to exploit them. And even in my kind of academic work, I looked at what happened in the Nazi Holocaust, and they were very skilled at their language use, you know, in order to dehumanize the Jewish population, you know, and it happens all the time. You know, we want to elevate the status of other animals. Those who use other animals for their instrumental reason, they want to deflate their status to lower them. That's what's going on.
Yeah, because I think it was quite clear that Sandra was talking about other animals. It was quite clear and obvious. It was actually making a point to stop her and say, "Oh, what do you mean? You mean the animals?" Yes, I mean the other animals. You know, it was very like, by individuals. Do you mean the animals? It's quite obvious, and everyone in the chat is saying how angry that clip made them. I'm really glad it did you as well, because I was fuming when I watched that clip. My blood was boiling, and I was. That man had a name, definitely. I won't repeat it now, but I did have a lovely name for that man. We'll leave that to your imagination.
On that point, though, Wendy, I'd like people to consider that the journalist there thought that she was doing, one, her audience a favor, and probably two, Sandra a favor, by clarifying the language. And I think that she might have thought, as the journalist now, well, if I let Sandra just say these words, the audience are not going to understand what she's saying. You see, the point is...
Do you think that's a point in our favor, though?
Well, they don't understand.
Well, actually, because I think so many times with words, and Roger and I just did a thing about images versus words and how our brains are quite poor at processing words. I think by stopping and highlighting it, actually, I'd favor that. If you know, if I'm saying something, and if because it's clearly not clear to them. I'm sure it wasn't clear to a lot of people in the audience, and by shining a light on it, it is actually posing the question at least. Whereas otherwise, it might just get swept under the conversation.
I suppose if a non-vegan heard that verbiage and it was kind of like, wow, maybe that's interesting, or I haven't thought about it like that. Yeah, then the journalist repeating it in a way that's more absorbable, maybe. Yeah, I can see that. Accentuating the emphasis on that.
I mean, I think it's quite interesting, because I imagine if you asked the journalist, she would probably say that she thought she was kind of doing Sandra a favor in a way, just to, and also she had her own audience in mind, in the sense that there's no point in one of her main guests losing the audience, because that was right at the beginning of the show too. So you know,
and it kind of had the opposite effect in a way for him, didn't it? And that he took umbrage with that and said, "Oh, I'm very interested by your use of language, and isn't it very clever packaging and all of that," which he kind of then made a point about it, didn't he? Which I guess most of the audience would have been in agreement with as well.
Yeah, well, the farmers never use clever language and packaging, do they, in their own favor?
Of course not. Totally neutral.
Yeah, they have slaughterhouse footage playing on the grocery store walls, don't they? Yeah.
And it's true that most non-vegans don't see other animals as individuals, and this is one of the very important functions of sanctuaries. When non-vegans get there and get to interact, with other animals, I think it's more possible to see them as individuals.
Well, the thing is, we give our animal companions individual names, and in fact, going back to what I think Jennifer just said about names for other animals, there was this flesh company, meat company in England called Real Meat, and I probably told this story before, but they were selling, genuine free-range meat as far as their marketing was concerned. And they did indeed give the animals in their unit names, and then they found that made it more difficult for them to send them to slaughter. And so then they tried to. This is almost a bit funny, really, but they tried to give them names that they wouldn't like they would call them Adolf or Goring or something, right? And that didn't work either. And so they just went back to calling them numbers, and that's the reason why for the animal agriculture industry, you're talking about units of production with numbers. I mean, ear tags, numbers. It's all deliberate in order to maintain that distance in terms of status, but also the ability to instrumentally exploit them. You need to work at it a little bit, because if you get too close to other animals of any species, you're in trouble if you want to then exploit them.
Yeah, and I think just taking a step back, I know other terms that I've used for the other animals at Sanctuary is residents, and one that Peak uses is people, which I don't think they necessarily were intentionally making a political stance. It just came naturally for them to refer to them in that way because they saw them as, equals and so forth. An interesting anecdote about Friend, I know Marion, who started it now maybe 26 years ago, actually didn't name any of the residents because her perspective was just let them live their lives. I don't need to name them or, to assign a value to them. They have value in their own right without me, doing that. I think, from a advocacy perspective, I think when we're sharing content widely, the name thing I think does help because why shouldn't they be worthy of a name? But there's definitely different takes on that. And certainly when we're commodifying them with a number or something like that, and the ear tags, don't get me started on ear tags. That just really and they're required by law. Sanctuaries would get in a lot of trouble with particular species if they didn't have tags, especially if they're relocating them. And
Yeah.
you're an object, and it's really go ahead.
I'll tell you one kind of slightly kind of not jokey, but it's not entirely serious. But if somebody says, "What's the name of X other animal?" I'm tempted to say I don't know, but we call her, whatever it is, Beatrice. Because
to highlight that's a human decision and that they didn't consent to being named. To be fair, we don't really consent to our names either, do we?
Well, but the thing is, there's a strong history of people changing their own names, and they'll change the spelling of their own name, they'll shorten it in order to, be a bit rebellious. Other animals presumably don't have that unless every time they hear the name that we impose on them, they say to themselves, "That ain't my name, mate, but I'll answer anyway." I don't know.
Well, and interestingly, because this is a strong point, because the reporter did kind of interrupt Sandra going back to the clarifications that could have been held towards the end of her making her point. So that possibly would have been a better thing. The live interviews like that, I imagine, they're under quite a lot of pressure to make points quickly. I appreciate.
Well, that's a problem though, Jeremy, because it means that all the time that the journalist was clarifying meant that Sandra wasn't really able to make her first point because it had been timed out. So, so even though it might have been, we could, I mean, like you'd almost need to kind of do a kind of media analysis of that program in those terms to be able to judge on that, I would think.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting dialogue around the funding around Sanctuaries. I think maybe we can put a pin in that and maybe loop that into some type of future installment because we are coming up on the hour, and that could be an hour on its own, right? I think one of the big inspirations behind this session was around interacting with other animals at Sanctuary. So maybe, I don't know if anybody has personal anecdotes of how they interact with the residents at a sanctuary, and we've been talking about how it's their space, not ours. I know as vegans, the temptation is to run over and give everyone a hug because we're like, oh, I'm so happy, this is why I'm vegan type thing. But
yeah, this is something that. Go, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, this is something that really is very close to my heart, and it's something that I've noticed a lot at Sanctuaries is when you do get volunteers there, and especially, activists and vegans who are very much really do care about other animals. Often there is that real desire to go straight up to the other animal, stroke them, pick them up, really get into their space. Oh, can I have a selfie with you? And as much as I know that's coming from a good place of really wanting to make a connection, that we have to remember that although we might want to make that connection with another animal, we want to touch them, we want to do whatever, that other animal might not want to make that connection with us, or might not want to in that moment, because of course, every one of those is an individual, every one of them is an individual, and they also are going to have their own characteristics and personalities, but they're also going to have their own moods. I know even with the cat people that I care for, it's taken me years to build up the trust and understanding of how they how the connections they want with me, when they want affection, when they don't, but yet each day is very, very different because they have their moods as well. So I think we have to try to step back a little bit, give them space, acknowledge that they're individuals and that they might not be in the right place. They might be tomorrow, they might never be. It's a case by case as well, I think, because some other animals will literally seek out affection. Like one of the sanctuaries that I go to, there are 2 dogs, and literally as soon as you arrive into the yard, there's a big dog called Norbert at New Hope, and he is absolutely enormous, and he's just so affectionate, but he seems quite intimidating because he literally barks really loud and really deep bark and comes charging at you like he will literally knock you over. And then if he gets you to stroke him, and then if you stop stroking him, he barks at you. So he's coming seeking, and he literally barges his body against you as well the whole time you're stroking him. And you can tell he really, really wants affection. But there are other dogs and other animals there that they've had a very difficult start, a very difficult background, and you just respect that and give them space and don't try to force yourself onto them. I think it's really important that we remember.
It's become a form of activism, though, hasn't it? I mean, I've lost count of the number of animal advocates I've seen kissing the noses of cows and this kind of image. So, are you saying, Wendy, that is there a way of doing that in which you can ensure genuine consent, or is it just a question of being a bit more careful, or what?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect solution to this or a perfect answer, because obviously some of these other animals may very well enjoy that connection with us. I think it's maybe take time to build the trust and relationship like you would with another human. Maybe like if you met another human in the street, it's unlikely that you would just jump on them and give them a massive hug, out of nowhere. You might take time to get to know that person a little bit more, or you might have a little handshake. I don't know. I don't think it's the perfect answer, but I think it's always asking yourself that question: am I being respectful to this individual in this moment? Is this for and about me, or is it for and about them? These are the questions that I ask myself, even with my own the cats in my house that I live with. Am I giving them space to be who they are? And then if you are kind of looking after the other animals as well, are you giving them space to have an enriched and fulfilled life as well? It's just the questions that you can ask yourself, I think, and improve on things all the time in your relationships with other animals. I don't think there's a perfect answer, but I think, take time, give them space. Ask yourself why you're doing it. Have they given consent, or are they resisting as well? That's another thing. I know they can't maybe give you the consent as in say yes or no, but they will show signs perhaps. You have to be really open to listening to them and reading them a little bit more.
And most of the time... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Roger.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say that most of the time, if they want to interact, you can tell. I have an example. I was watching 3 sheeps, and I've been told that one of them, named Gabriel, was blind and almost deaf. So I was watching them from afar, and then Gabriel came to me and put his head on my knees. And for me, that was the sign, like, he wanted a cuddle or something. He wanted the contact and the affection, and it was very clear to me because he came to me. So there are always signs like that we must wait to see before we interact with the other animals.
Could be a socialized thing, though. Again, going in relation to what you've just said now and what Wendy said, it's tricky to know really, whether consent is being given, because it could be a socialized thing, almost in the little infants, go and kiss grandma, type of thing, because it's kind of part of a routine, and then they know there's reward and this kind of stuff, and so to actually be very clear and to be sure that there's no exploitation, because my feeling probably is that other animals probably most of all probably want to be with their own kind, or those that they choose to be with who are not necessarily humans. And so I certainly would be very critical of any sanctuary that would facilitate interaction with humans over their own little social group and family and all that kind of stuff. So I think we just have to be very careful about it.
When I go to Tower Hill, there's a few gooses, and when I turn up, they one or two of them often hiss at me. So they make it pretty clear that I don't want to be anywhere near you, which is,
Yeah, but we do that in our planning meetings, Tom. So I see there's some confessions here. Sam has said I mostly end up picking up their poo, and I think he said somewhere I actually enjoy it or something. So it's all confession time now, folks.
There's nothing like it, Sam. I'm totally with you. There's nothing like being stuck knee deep in mud.
It's one of those rare jobs we can do when we see a tangible end. I mean, it's a never-ending cycle. My favorite is right when you've cleaned everything up, all of a sudden one will, do their thing. It's like, yeah, thanks a lot. I've been spending all day cleaning that up, but there you go. So it's
Jeremy, do what thing? What are you trying to say, Jeremy?
Well, I think it's really encouraging to see in the comments. It's like what Michelle is saying here, on their terms, regardless of species. I had the privilege of actually, when I first went vegan, this is a number of years ago now, working in the SPCA in Singapore, and they were very knowledgeable about dog behavior. And I think, to be honest, I'm not sure. I think regardless of species, to Michelle's point, I think this is useful. There's a lot of dogs that, for lack of a better term, had been institutionalized and would even be reluctant to leave the shelter just to even go for their, walk. And it was a very brief time outside that we're trying to give them. But the thing I learned there is kneeling down to make ourselves smaller is really useful. I mean, obviously, we always want to have an exit plan. So if there's a group of cows, knowing if they, if one of them from behind moves forward and startles the ones in the front, where are we going to move, that kind of thing. But in general, making ourselves small makes us more approachable. I think especially turning away from them is less intimidating, so they can approach you from behind is one thing that works quite well. But I think to Wendy's point is, if they don't feel like interacting, respecting that and say, you know what, because sometimes I'll just kneel down and they'll just walk right on by. I'm like, all right, cool, we're not saying hi today, I'm cool with that. And just versus kind of the approaching them. It seems like there's a lot of knowledge with the people who are watching now, and I think the key is to help others to come to that understanding, because I don't think this is very widely known or respected by those visiting sanctuaries in general. And obviously there's the people who run the sanctuary, but I think everyone who attends, if you see people running over and hugging, the residents there, just kind of helping to build awareness around that is something we can probably all do.
I do sometimes wonder with sorry, Roger.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say with some animals who've been kind of in some ways conditioned to follow, I don't know how to follow the lead of a caregiver, or to do certain things in a habitual way, whether sometimes they might even not know that they have autonomy, that they might just do things because they expect that's what the caregiver wants. And I certainly noticed that sometimes I'm more mindful of it now with my Sweep, who's the canine fan member that my parents have in their home. Because he's to me, he appears very, very docile, very calm, and he would probably do anything that one of the other human family members would ask. So it's kind of like, I think more about, being more mindful of that. So he's deaf, so he gets startled quite easily. So the one thing I've tried to do with that is I approach him from if he's sleeping or he needs to maybe go outside for to do his thing, as Jeremy might say, I approach him so he can see me, and then if he's sleeping, I'll put my hand just below his nose so that he can, it's a way of waking him in a very gentle, respectful way.
Sounds good. Do we have time for a short sanctuary-related anecdote in relation to what Michelle was saying about it kind of in on their own terms and kind of getting to know the species in the sense of what you were saying, Jeremy? Do we have 2 minutes for that?
We did until you asked permission. Now we don't.
Time, everyone. Go on, Roger.
That was yes. Go
Tell
on.
us. I'm dying to hear it now.
I'll full screen you.
Tease. So when I was in Liverpool, a cow escaped from a slaughterhouse in a place called Birkenhead, and that was on the Wirral. And when a cow does that, they tend to be made into a bit of a celebrity. And the cow was purchased by the Daily Star newspaper, and they made a big fuss of the cow for a few days, and then we found out that they were going to sell the cow back to the farmer who had taken her to the slaughterhouse in the first place. So Freshfield Animal Rescue Centre, I was a volunteer at the time, intervened and said, that was very disrespectful, violation of rights. You should not do that, and we'll take the cow. And so we did, and there wasn't really room at the sanctuary, so we took her at the kind of nerve centre of the Hunt Saboteurs, which was a place called Dungeon Lane in Liverpool, and we had 3 houses or cottages because we paid £5 per week for rent of number 5. The agent didn't know that number 4 was there, so that was free. So that's where I lived. And then number 3 was all broken down, and so that ended up being the stable or the place for the cow to live. And she ended up being pregnant, so we ended up with 2. But often farmers on an annual basis they're killed by cows, crushing them, right? And the reason for that is that they're just kind of being friendly. If you go along the side of them, they'll lean on you in a friendly kind of way. But if you're against a wall, it can be very dangerous, So kind of knowledge of them is very kind of important, and it's just quite interesting the fact that cows have got this reputation of being dangerous towards their captors and slavers because they just are trying to be friendly, I suppose, or at least they're just using that instinct to lean when they're touching. You're going along their side, and if you're touching them, they have an instinct to lean.
Yeah, and I think I could tell a lot of stories. Well, a lot of species, but cows specifically, and I know donkeys will do this. They'll actually wrap their head around you and I like to think of it as kind of their way of hugging. And this is them coming over to me and then doing this. This isn't, obviously initiating the action, building on what we were saying earlier. One of the first videos I did was, can donkeys hug type of thing. And you can see them wrapping their head around me, which, I think we are kind of humanizing these things. Like, maybe they call it something different than a hug, but to me, it feels like a hug. So it's, but yeah, like you said, much better when there's not a wall involved maybe, but they're super aware in my experience. I mean, you know how they'll flick their tails side to side for the flies? I'll notice if I'm standing on one side, they'll stop flicking their tail to that side and only flick to the other side because they know I'm there. They truly are gentle giants. That's been my experience with them. And to build on Twisted Hippie's comment here, it's an uncanny feeling. It's maybe some kind of cognitive bias, but it certainly feels like animals understand basic human emotions. And especially non-vegans, I like to think, oftentimes we hear that humans are, have a higher intelligence and superior in all these ways. I'm convinced other animals have a higher level of emotional intelligence. I've heard that cows have 70% more emotional intelligence than, the humans. And I don't know how they do these numbers, but that's been my experience. And perhaps because it's unfiltered, they're not messing with all this other stuff. They can just literally interact on a very personal basis. I know we haven't really talked about it much, but to me, I think sanctuaries also provide refuge for activists that, we get burnout, all the trauma we're exposed to. We go there, we're in nature, we're interacting with individuals on a whole new level, maybe never met some of these species or individuals before, so it's... Yeah.
There is a video called The Emotional Life of Farm Animals, Farm, not Farmed, and I can't remember who made it, and I've not seen it referenced, and I haven't actually seen it for years. In fact, I'm not even sure I've seen it all the way through. I remember Vegan Island showed it, so it must be talking about 2011 or something. But they were looking specifically at that point, the emotional life of other animals, and I think it was some findings from cognitive ethology. That thing. I made that point when we were on the live stream with Michelle, that most of human knowledge about other animals has been how to exploit them. It's only really been the last 40 years and last 20 in particular when we started to look at their kind of David Attenborough side, if you like, but looking at their lives from their own point of view and just learning from them by observing them rather than experimenting them or putting them in situations they don't like and all the rest of it. But I mean, we are learning things that we never knew was possible, and we didn't actually think would be possible, which is great. I mean, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
I was just going to say 20 years ago, like when the vegan movement started.
Yeah, was that 2018? Was it?
You mean it's been going that long?
Going back to what you were saying about emotions of animals, though, I really agree with that as well, because if you think about how much other animals are in touch with nature and connected to nature, whereas humans, it's almost like the more we get into our minds, and like you said, Jeremy, about filters, the more we filter everything, the more we are conditioned and programmed through our minds and trying to think logically and with reason, which of course has served us as humans. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I feel like we get caught up in thinking so much, and actually we're socialized to push down our emotions because we don't want to show emotions a weakness, or we don't want to burden other people with how we're feeling, and feelings are, especially in the patriarchy, feelings and emotions are very much pushed down and seen as a little bit of a negative thing. We are rational, logical human beings, none of that emotion stuff. So actually we spend most of our time trying to move away from our emotions, where the other animals are living in their emotions. So they probably feel emotions in such a heightened way, compared to what we do, that when they feel joy, they feel joy. You only have to watch a dog ready to go out for a walk to know joy. Do you know what I mean? Or if they feel sorrow, they probably really feel the sorrow of loss of the mum losing her calf. You can hear that in her voice, and I really do believe that they are so emotional, such emotional creatures, and I can't believe that we have to wait for science to catch up to tell us this. For me, it just is instinctual. You feel it.
That to me, I think you just really hit on a big benefit of sanctuaries. Is because actually seeing, ideally in person, but also through content we create, is really just showing. Because I think the science is just catching up. I think you go to sanctuary, you can see it for yourself.
And also the sanctuary is the place activists go when they feel disheartened or tired of the whole animal oppression and everything. And I have a very short story to share with you. In Greece, we don't have many or large sanctuaries. There are mostly micro sanctuaries, and the largest one is called Ruba Farm. And one of the residents in this sanctuary is the first and only cow that was rescued in Greece. And they named her Elpida, which means hope, because she became a symbol of hope for the next generations of cows that would probably don't be oppressed and exploited. And I know that every activist in Greece, when they are sad or depressed about the whole situation, they go to the sanctuary, and for some reasons they go to hope. And when we leave from there, we feel this kind of strength, and she has been always able to provide us with that. And I think she knows she has this very strong personality, and she makes her likes and dislikes very clear. And I think that she knows when the human that approaches her is sad, and she interacts accordingly, time and time again.
Yeah, I think they could probably teach us a lot of things, couldn't they? I mean, just catching up on some of the comments here. Michelle was just talking about, I think this is something about a few of us can appreciate, that cat friends that only become more active when we're on a call or something. So they clearly want to get involved in the action too.
Yeah, where's Brian? He's usually here by now.
Oftentimes on
Where are
Roger's
you?
screen, I'll see a tail pop up.
And it's not Roger.
So we think. So this,
Yeah, let's not go there, eh, Wendy?
yeah, that's just
That wasn't
reiterating
meant
letting
to
the
sound as
individuals
that.
come up. Moving right along.
Nothing to see here. Moving on.
Yeah, just reiterating some of these things about letting individuals come up to us and monthly donations, because I think the one-off donations are good, but I know it's easy. I lean more towards monthly donations because it'd be easy to forget, and that that their care requires regular support. And volunteering, absolutely.
That's obviously the best solution, but if someone feels that cannot commit on a monthly donation, one-off donations or even buying stuff from the wish lists is something we can do as an alternative. I know that they are doing stuff this time of year, like Secret Santas and stuff like that. And it's another way to offer something to sanctuaries.
Secret Santas, they're reindeer exploiters, aren't they?
Just a question here about the YouTube channels. In the description, at least, it looks like you're watching on YouTube. So in the YouTube videos, there is links to all of our work. If you are curious and looking us up further, we appreciate that, because this is just kind of a bit of a fun side project, but it's definitely become a fun passion project. I know it has for me, at least. Yeah, and just looking through some of the comments, the playfulness and ability to engage in gameplay. Cats are both curious their environment and enjoy games as much as dogs or cats. The one thing I would just have to mention goats real quickly. I don't know how many people have goat stories. I have lots, but they are just so much fun. There's around 7 at Friend, and particularly the 4 youngest girls who were rescued from the goat milk industry. Yeah, that exists, if we want to call it that, so-called. Literally, you just put you can put something on the corner of their enclosure, and they'll explore around like, what's new, and it's super curious. So it's really fun just to watch them try to experience the world through their eyes, kind of.
Yeah, I got butted by Dave at Friend.
Dave can be a tricky one.
Dave's a little trickster. Yeah,
he likes his bum scratched, but yeah, you scratch his head, you might be surprised. Yeah.
I was just putting some hay in his bed, and he was like, "What are you doing? Get out of my town!"
Must have been the wrong hay.
I was like, "Sorry, Dave. I'll just step back."
Yeah, and this is an interesting one that is probably worthy for a conversation on a future call, is that connection between so-called pets and so-called farm animals. And I do think there's a empathy that can be built upon for species we have connected with. I do think that's quite key, because most people have interacted with dogs or cats or similar, but they haven't interacted with cows, pigs, turkeys, chickens, and so on. So
Yeah, but that would feed into what Jonah was saying, if I understood him there, in the sense that, what one way to fund sanctuaries would be, for if the vegans are going to get involved with that, is rather than funding them themselves, encouraging non-vegans to do it, and then the vegans could use their cash for vegan advocacy. Because if we could do that, then those people who get involved with funding the sanctuary might make those connections that you just referred to, Jeremy, perhaps,
Just on that note, actually, I know that from speaking to someone who runs a sanctuary, they say that when they're trying to raise any money for another animal like a cow or a pig or a sheep or someone like that, that they really, really struggle. But because they rescue a lot of dogs, when they put out fundraising for dogs, that they surpass their targets really, really quickly. And often a lot of those people are non-vegans. So it's that whole speciesist kind of element where people are, they're dog lovers but not really sort of aware of the other animals or willing to give money, because it seems like, oh, there's no connection there somehow. But they raise a lot of money through dogs, which they then share out to the other animals. So interesting.
And this species animals, this species issue you mentioned is obvious in language too, because often I hear humans referring to dogs and cats as she or he, but referring to cows and hens and sheep as it.
It, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bound to be.
Yeah.
Also, going back to the dog lover thing, I'm not quite sure if the animal movement is helping by all this emphasis on being an animal lover malarkey, rather than talking about the issue of respecting other animals for who they are and not violating their rights. The criteria of being a lover of animals is not really that relevant. But I see it's an interesting generational thing for me, because it was rejected a few years ago. The kind of pet lover thing. That wasn't the deal at all. But I've noticed it's come back into the movement, which is interesting.
Yeah, but the movement is not about love; it's about justice. I mean, you don't have to love every other animal and every other species or every other human to respect them.
Yeah, but our just as we talk about cruelty rather than rights violation, advocates talk about love rather than justice. So
It's certainly part of the picture. It's not the whole picture. I think it may work for some, but it's. I think when it's our key claims making, we're excluding people that might be more responsive to the respect and justice line. I think definitely.
Yeah, it's very anthropic in the sense that we're putting a value that we hold dear on other species, and that issue that you spoke to, worried about diluting the message of justice as well, which Lily touched on. It's problematic.
Yeah, it's like they're only important if we love them. How about they're important in their own right, regardless of how we feel about them, or if they're like us, or if they, want to connect with us. It's irrelevant.
Yeah, because respect's more about them, love's more about us, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love them versus they are worthy of respect. Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. As usual, the hour's flown right by. I'd like to invite everybody to keep this going when the YouTube videos finish, because they'll show up better in the main comments. Let us know what sanctuary you've been to. Tell us a bit of a story, and let's get a bit of a sanctuary swap, for lack of a better term, going, because I'd like to know what other sanctuaries advocates are supporting out there.
Yeah, we want more poo stories, folks.
Roger, your jokes are always so shit. Got to end it on a controversial note, right?
Well, we got you to say the word in the end anyway.
Yay!
You just had to wait.
Is your
now.
mom still watching? Are you,
Stop all the
Kristen?
pissing
Is he going to get told off for that, Kristen?
She'll talk to me about it later.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I've really enjoyed this community building, if nothing else, in addition to the thought sharing. So, yeah, let's do it again next Sunday. And yeah, remember Animal Rights Show on Facebook and Instagram to stay up on what we're doing.
I was just laughing at Deb's little emoji, sorry. She put a little shit emoji. Thanks, Deb.
That's just a comment on the show, maybe.
Could be.
Hope you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you next time.
Bye. See you next Sunday.
Bye-bye.